So Jack, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm also joined by Victor Perton, our Chief Executive Optimist at the Centre for Optimism, who shares a passion for optimists. And as part of the AWISE Summit, we like to explore the relationship between optimism and innovation. After a couple of challenging years with lockdowns and social distancing, we're excited to be heading back in 2022 to be running the event as a face-to-face event in Albury-Wodonga. It's quite unfortunate that your trip to Australia probably doesn't quite align to join us in person. However, we really appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you here today online, Jack. Victor, over to you.
Jack, you are an optimist, and whenever the Centre for Optimism is involved in anything, the first question we ask people, Jack, is what makes you optimistic?
You know what? And that is a relatively easy question for me to answer. I'm old enough to have experienced so many highs in my life, and every one of those highs has always been followed by a low. I mean, literally, we could diagram those highs and lows. The thing that I am most encouraged about is when I'm in that low pit, I know that it's going to be short-lived and good times are ahead. And so I'm excited, even at the lows, because I know that there's good news down the road. One of the businesses that I had years ago was in the mortgage business. We did home loans. And in the United States today, where I am today, the current loan rate on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which is our typical loan on a home, is about 5%. Now, it got as low as 2.5%. But the people that are in that industry are crying because they're saying, I don't know if I'm going to do business. I'm pessimistic about the industry because who's going to do a loan at 5%? When I was in the business, Victor, I can tell you that a 30-year fixed rate loan was 17.5%. And when the rates moved to 12, we were having ticker tape parades saying, does life get any better? Now, what that message to me tells me is that evidently rates are not, they don't relate. What's important is what is in between our ears, the 6 inches between our ears. That's the thing we have control over. When the interest rates were 17.5% and my competitors all went negative and pessimistic, I said, people will always need to live in homes and they can't buy them for cash. So they're going to have to borrow at any rate. And I'm so optimistic because I'm the only guy out here lending now. And so the competitors have all gone away. And so anything that I look at in my life, I look at it as a challenge, but my mental state is always optimistic. And by the way, thanks for giving me the airtime here. Let me, I'm a voracious reader. Last year I read 102 books. One of my favorite books was a book called Mindset. And Mindset is written by a woman by the name of Carol DeWitt. And what she says is basically this: we fall into one of two groups. We're either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And we're not born with a fixed mindset or growth mindset. We get to choose at any point in time in our life. From an optimist standpoint, all I am is a growth mindset guy. I just can't see the negatives. All I can see is the positives. It is in the jar right here.
That is absolutely brilliant, Jack. And you could have written the Harvard Medical School definition of optimism, which is a belief that good things will happen and that things will work out in the end.
It is, there's no question that it's true. You know, I wanted to do an Ironman, and Guy knows this, and an Ironman is a big undertaking. A 3.8 kilometer swim, followed by a 180 kilometer bike, followed by a 42K run. At 58 years old, I decided to take on the Ironman. And the curious thing about it is that I did not know how to swim. In the next 8 succeeding years, between 58 and 66, I did 15 full Ironmans. 4 of them were in Australia. I performed eventually at the level of making the podium in either first, second, or third in my age group, and was elected to make Team USA. And yet, when I first got into it, people said, "You don't know how to swim and you're 58 years old, you're too old." And I said, well, if everybody's telling the 58-year-old guys they're too old, that means there's a lot less guys that I have to compete against. So if I just do the work, I'll probably do pretty well at the sport. Again, the 6 inches between our ears.
Well, as the original Ford said, the man who thinks he can and the man who thinks he can't, they're both right. And I interviewed someone recently who's 88 and a leader. He said, my best years are ahead of me.
This sits on the desk of when Reagan was president. And I picked this up at the presidential library. That statement that you just made, Victor, is a statement that I make in front of all of my CEO audiences that I speak to. And the question I ask is this: are your best days behind you or ahead of you? I can tell you at 73, I've led an unbelievably gifted, magical life that I am tremendously grateful for. But I can also tell you, even after losing my wife of 47 years, who I met when I was 16, I sit here today with all authentic genuineness and tell you that I am convinced my best days are ahead of me.
That's fantastic. Now, look, reading, you've written so much and you've given so many inspiring speeches. But looking back, in the context of sales and growth, you have talked about the value of tough-minded optimism. And like us at the Centre for Optimism, realistic optimism. And you've said leaders are positive cheerleaders who each day provide a message of optimism for those they work with. And in fact, Dominic Barton, who's the head of McKinsey, was the head of McKinsey, now the head of Rio, like you, said every great leader he'd ever met is infectiously optimistic. So would you share your view on the value of positive and optimistic leadership in the 2020s?
Yeah, so the way you position the question, Victor, is absolutely on point. I've built a half a dozen businesses from scratch, from a blank sheet of paper into national firms in the US, extremely fast-growing companies. And for the last 25 years, I've traveled the globe helping other entrepreneurs and business leaders grow their businesses. And there's a lot of things that need to be done in order to build a successful business. But as a leader, I have really learned, and I'll mention another book that's a favorite of mine, and that's Essentialism. It's written by McCowan, and that is that we will do better by working on fewer things. Just make those things the right things. Too many people doing too many things and dilute themselves. Focus precedes success, right? And so here is my short course for an entrepreneur to have optimism in any market and what they ought to be working on. It's three things. One is vision. You can't get there unless you know what there is. What is it you're trying to build? I can't help somebody build something if they're not articulate in being defined what the destination is. And all too often, we find entrepreneurs and business leaders that are flapping in the wind because they don't have their true north. The second thing is key people in key spots. That I don't have to worry about the execution in building my business if I have a half a dozen brilliant leaders that are positively charged and understand what the vision is and their respective roles in the company. And then the third ingredient of three is to create a winning culture, to create an environment in your business where the people who work in it don't get up in the morning moaning and groaning about having to go to work, but bounce out of bed and say, hot damn, I get to work at this company. Because if you can create that kind of an environment, and you can, you'll have a competitive, sustainable advantage. Now, notice what I didn't talk about. I didn't talk about the competition. I didn't talk about the economy. I didn't talk about the product, the service, the price. All of that will take care of itself. I just need to have clarity of vision, people to execute on the vision, and create this base of culture.
That is so brilliant, Jack. When Barton spoke to me, he also said that those great leaders are infectiously optimistic, but it's not the big speech from the man or woman at the podium. It's the person who can unlock the optimism in the team. And Jack, we've now interviewed 20,000 people on their optimism. Less than 1% talk about the boss. Less than 1% talk about the business. Optimism comes from the heart or faith or a belief in mankind or a belief in science. And the smart leader knows what makes those people optimistic. But speaking of optimism, you know, that shirt says it all. Guy Rowson, you've got some questions for Jack.
Thank you, Victor. Jack, loving hearing from you today. What I would say is, in today's fast-paced global economy, organisations need to continually focus not on just innovation, but also being adaptable. And you've had an esteemed career as a sales coach. You've long shared the view that we should model the masters, and that one key question or point to selling is ask questions and listen. So, Jack, what would you say is key to sales innovation today, and how have sales leaders had to pivot to adapt in recent times?
So we're still struggling with COVID. It isn't the pain that it was 2 years ago, but we're still struggling with it a bit. Let's go back 2 years. So here in the States, in March of 2020, we went into lockdown. And I want you to think about my 2019. My 2019 was over 250,000 air miles, and I visited over 30 countries, and I spoke to hundreds of thousands of people. And people started to call me when the lockdown took place and said, "How you doing with your business?" And I said, "Well, I fly around the world and I speak to large groups of people." What an asinine question to ask. I mean, this is terrible. And so what am I going to do about it? So here is that answer. What I said was this, and I do CEO coaching around the world over the phone. And I had to tell my coach clients, hey guys, you know, this optimism about this pandemic will be behind us in 3 months. That's not quality thinking. The quality thinking should be, what if it lasts 2 to 4 years? How are you going to make your business work in a pandemic world of 2 to 4 years? Now, if you're right with your optimism, which I would consider to be overly done, but if you're right and it ends in 4 months, then whatever we're going to talk about is just protection and insurance. But at least we'll be around if it goes longer than that. So I took my own advice and said, if companies could ever use my services, now is the time. But I can't go to them and they can't come to me unless I do it virtually. So I brought in a crew, and in my home, I built a virtual studio with the finest of equipment ever, and went out to the community and said, I can come to you virtually and it'll be as if I'm there live. June of 2020, I set a Guinness World Record. I didn't have it on my bucket list to do it, but the Guinness World Record was set for the largest attendance at a virtual business conference of 21,261 people. That was within 3 months of lockdown. People tell me old dogs can't learn new tricks. Well, at the time of lockdown, I was 71 years old. And 3 months into it, I set a world record. I also will tell you, pre-pandemic, what I said was The maximum nights I'll sleep in a hotel each year for business is 100, which meant that I was limited to 100 speaking gigs in a year. When the pandemic hit, I was running months where I was doing 17 gigs a month and playing golf in the afternoon. And my clients were absolutely buoyant. They were cheering because it was effective, it was efficient, and it was what they needed right then. So let me go back, Guy, and go after that question from a sales standpoint. And from a selling standpoint, the answer to your question is this: people do not want to be sold. No one likes a salesperson trying to sell them things. So if I'm a salesperson in that kind of an environment, how can I be optimistic and how can I be effective? And the way that you can is to change the definition. And here is my preferred one: help them to buy. The subtle difference between selling someone something and helping them to buy is profound. Help them with their needs, their opportunities, their problems. Here, let me make it real simple. People buy to get out of pain or put themselves in a state of pleasure. Find out what their pains are and then deliver. And if I take sales to the ultimate level, help them with their pains, even if it means not you and your product and service. And if you help enough people that are in pain and put them into a place of pleasure, you will get repeat business, you will get referral business, because you will have established the bedrock of success at selling, which is trust. Selling is the transfer of trust. People do business with people they trust.
That's fantastic, Jack. And I think that you really answered the next question I was going to have, which was, when all the hype's boiled down to basics, what motivates people to buy? And what you've said is exactly true. And I do recall how consistent you are to your message. You said trust trumps price all day long. You know,
for sure.
So listen, people buy from people.
Look, Guy, if you ever wanted to, you know, I use this expression a lot: model the masters. If you ever want to find a way to be successful at anything in life, find people who've already figured out how to be successful and do what they're doing, right? Now, one of the most successful companies that I know out there is Amazon. And you know what Amazon's success is based on? They make it easy for you to buy. So I would challenge people and ask them, are you making it easy to buy? I literally can leave you guys, go online right now, go to Amazon, look at anything and everything, order it, and it'll be at my home before the end of the day and at a competitive price. So if that's the way the world works today, I then, as a salesperson and a business person, have to figure out, how do I effectively compete in that kind of an environment? And what I'm going to try to do is be just as easy to do business with. And my studio and doing things virtually is just one example of how I've pulled that off.
Jack, I've got another question if you're up for it.
Oh, sure.
The evidence is that in Australia and the United States, optimism is falling, right? And my theory is part of it is the way that news media works now. It's just this grueling, you know, our country is bad, our leaders are bad, the statistics are bad. In Australia last week, we had our lowest unemployment rate in 48 years. The major newspaper headlined it as pressure on interest rates. So do you want to talk about that problem? You know, in a country like America and a country like Australia, where our global stereotype is relentless optimism, what can we do as individuals to help lift those people around us?
Yeah. And by the way, Victor, I think that you're spot on in terms of the impact of media. And I'd go even further. Forget about the organized structural media. but the social media, the unverifiables that the public sometimes is giving more credence to than they should. And we've got outliers that are just making things up and going online, and we have people that are buying it. In America, we have our nightly shows that are at 11:30 at night that are comedians that are pretending to be news people, and there's a following of them, and they believe it. So that whole media impact, I think, is spot on. Now, the more important question is, given that's the environment, how do we maintain and grow our sense of optimism? How do we effectively deal with it? And the way I talk about it is this: focus on that which you have control of.
Yeah.
That, to me, brings sanity. I failed science in high school, and so anyone in the last 2 years that came to my home and wanted to talk about the COVID and the pandemic and the vaccine, I just said, I really can't add any value to the conversation. I'm not going to talk about it. If a vaccine becomes available, I'm of the belief that I should take it. And so I've been vaccinated twice and boosted twice. But I'm not going to create a vaccine. I don't have anything to contribute. There's only 168 hours each week that we get to invest in. I'm going to invest mine in the things that I can positively impact and have control over. And the rest of it, I'm just not going to worry about. And so I'm tone deaf to so much of it because I can't move the dial there. So I'm going to invest my time where I can move the dial. And I'm not going to get frustrated with the rest.
Yeah, what we do, Jack, is we say to people, smile and say hello to everyone, right? The Dalai Lama attributes his success to comes from a little country that's been held by the Chinese for 50 years, a religion that not many people follow, Tibetan Buddhism, but everyone loves the Dalai Lama because he smiles and says hello to everyone, and then laugh more like you have been doing, like the three of us have been doing. Bishop Tutu, who died 6 weeks ago, he said, God commands us to laugh. But one of the things we do, Jack, is in Australia, if you greet someone and you say, g'day, how are you? The typical response these days is not bad or not too bad. And so it's a wasted opening of a conversation. So we've trained prisoners, we've trained CEOs to get rid of that question, how are you? And replace it with something like, what's been the best thing in your day? And honestly, it improves 80% of conversations.
How about this one? I am asked that question all the time, all over the world. I have the same answer all the time.
Yep.
And that's this. Hey, Jack, how goes it? Fantastic. And it just drops people right in the street. Fantastic. And they look at me like with a weird look, and I go, well, let's look at it. Somebody probably got up before me today and they picked shitty. So it was already taken. So what I decided is I'm going to choose to be fantastic. And all of a sudden they just start laughing and we have an upbeat conversation. Look, I'm going to share something with you very personal. 2 weeks ago, I had a significant event in my life take place. I got to ring the bell. 2 years ago, 1 month after lockdown, I was brushing my hair and there was a bump on my head. And I went to my dermatologist and discovered I had stage 3 malignant melanoma. Serious stuff. On the first week of April 2020, I was in the hospital and they took off the size of the palm of my hand, about 1/8 of an inch thick, and then sewed me back up. About 8 months later, it reappeared in my neck. And the doctor said, we're going to need to put you in the cancer center for at least a year-long program. And so I have been infused with drugs over the last 54 weeks. And 3 weeks ago, the doctors at my infusion, when I was finished, said, based upon your CT scans, we need you to go down the hall and ring the bell. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, because you're done, you're cancer free, right? And I rang the bell, and all the doctors and the nurses started clapping and cheering, and the patients were clapping, cheering, and crying, right? And for the last 2 years, I have been speaking, and I have been traveling the world, and I've been doing my thing, and no one has really known that I've been battling this cancer. Because what I convinced myself was, if I embrace myself on that which I have control over, and I stay as positive as a human can be, I think I have a better chance at cracking the code. And the doctors have told me there's no question that your attitude was a big piece of your cure. No question about it. In fact, on November of last year, I ran my 100th marathon in Athens, Greece on the original route. And I ran 5 marathons while I was in the cancer treatment program. And the doctors just said, look, you've gone through all of this giant hurdle with such a positive attitude, and you've never given thought to the dark side. And I said, the only thing that I have control over is my attitude. And so why would I pick anything other than positive? Why would I not be optimistic? And if anybody can cure it, I'm going to be the one that cures it. Well, when I announced that on social media, because I had someone take a photo of me ringing the bell, there were thousands of people that came out of the woodwork, and their comments were, I had no question that you were going to win the battle. Because I've seen you speak, and I've seen you this, and you're always optimistic.
Well, you're the living proof. Harvard Medical School says optimism is the trait most keenly associated with healthy longevity. And the American Heart Association says optimism is the key protective trait for every major mortality and the key predictor of recovery. And one of the people I work with on the Positive Leadership Task Force, her husband's a heart surgeon. I'm not sure whether it's a joke or true, but he refers the pessimists to another heart surgeon.
That's one way of keeping your record in stellar shape. Too bad for the pessimists, nonetheless.
Exactly. No, you are a living model, Jack. So it's been such a privilege to spend time with you. Is there a final message you want to send to Australia and the world on the value of optimism in sales, the value of optimism in leadership, and as you've just said, the value of optimism in our personal lives?
I guess my final message would be this, that we truly have command of our thoughts and our attitude. And if given the choice, why would you choose anything other than positive? I have no idea why anybody would go in another direction.
As the Dalai Lama says, choose optimism, it feels better. Guy Rowson, to you to close off.
Thank you very much, Jack. I greatly appreciate you giving some of your time. And I do love the effortless and boisterous way that you carry yourself, even after those tribulations and challenges. I heard you mention 168 hours. When people say to me, Guy, I don't know how you do what you do. And I say, well, I just pity you. You have 7 days a week. I've got 168 hours, right? It is about focus. It is about what's in the jar, as you were saying, Jack. And at every given moment, you know, you've got a choice. You're turning left or you're turning right.
Hey, my first job professionally when I graduated from college was Arthur Andersen, the public accounting firm. And when you went there, you had to bill yourself out in 15-minute increments. And when I saw how effective that was for the business, what I then translated was, I should be investing my personal time in 15-minute segments. Control the time that you have and employ it in the things that will give you the greatest reward. And, you know, you've heard me say this before, Guy, And if you don't have an assistant, you are one. There are things that need to be done in life, but not necessarily done by you. So, taking on the things that, according to the book, are the most essential to get you where you want to be. I'm sure that you're aware that I just released my 10th book that is so different than all the other books I've written. The first 9 were all about business. My 10th book is called Jack Daly's Life by Design, and it's all about how to lead an intentional life by design. And it is a system and a process that I have been following for 60 years. I interviewed successful people at the age of 13 and built the processes based on their experience. And so I know the process works. And so much of it has to do with making the most of that 168 that we're given each week.
Yeah, the present moment, be focused. Jack, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to see you're still kicking on and you're rising to every challenge and every peak, not the least of which that bell that you rang. That's fantastic.